Hello and welcome to my cake kitchen. My name is Gladys, and over here I make simple, informative tutorials to help you navigate cake decorating easily. I also create baking tutorials live where we identify a particular objective, bake through the session, and either answer a question, solve a problem, all in the hope of giving you information that is reliable, that is tested, to inspire you to take your own baking at home with all the confidence you need. So if you see my face for the first time, hello, it's a pleasure to have you. Today we're doing something a little bit special. It is the start of a new series because I inadvertently walked into a series here. A little while ago on these live sessions, I had attempted to start a process of adapting an original recipe to suit the preferences of a couple. This would lead to a whole series of about 3-4 videos delving deep into flour and all sorts of things. In the process, we had some new friends join us here, which was super exciting. And within that interaction came the idea that if you're watching this stream, you get to choose a cake that you would probably love me to bake, and then I'll come here and bake it. The catch being, I perhaps has never baked this kind of cake before, so something new for both of us to learn. It presents us with a few learning opportunities. I will identify them. If I haven't baked it before, then I don't know what to expect, so it gives us a real raw chance and a same middle ground for all of us to start from, because essentially, even though I've baked for nearly a decade, I don't purport to know all things about baking. So if I don't know the recipe, I am probably as a novice as you. The only thing I have in my favor is the experience I bring to the table. But you will find very quickly that is not usually all you need to get a very good bake. Outside of that, it also gives you an opportunity to see what baking is like when you pick a new recipe and then try it out, whether that recipe can be reliable and I can recommend it. So this is not my recipe. I haven't tried this recipe before. I'll be delving deep into that. But on the notion of how we got here, in the suggestions, one of the first people who suggested a cake is our moderator on this channel, who is Amanda. Amanda is in Alabama, a very good friend of the channel. She moderates the chats, keeps everybody interactive and excited, which is amazing. So it was a pleasure that she nominated the classic pineapple upside down cake. Now, I've never baked a cake like that before, so I am super excited to start something new. Moreover, Amanda chose it. So the excitement of the adventure of undertaking something new, the lessons to be learned, and ultimately in the hope of reaching a very good bake is what we are doing today. The classic pineapple upside down cake is pretty straightforward. The origins of that recipe is very limited, but apparently it came about somewhere in the 1920s. The recipe I am going to be taking today, I will leave descriptions in the I will leave information in the description box, but it's from Stephanie Jaworski, I think her name is. I may have pronounced that wrong, but she's from joybaking.com. Why her? When I started baking 10 years ago, she was one of the people whose recipes guided me. And the good thing is her recipes are well adapted, very tested, simple with very precise instructions, and they come in cups and grams. So it's a safe place to start from. I could have picked a random recipe, but we are aiming for our best results here. And in the testing series, I did note that if you want to aim for something good in baking, you want to start from the known. So I have never tried the upside down pineapple cake before, more so from Stephanie or anybody else, but she is a safe person for me to consider on this note because I have tried her red velvet cake recipe. I have adapted my own recipes now that I use, but I'm not one who is opposed to using a recipe that is available online. But I'm also happy to not gatekeep and to hand you that information in totality. So I will be putting all those information in the description box, including a link to the exact video from which I have gleaned information to start this process. So I'm going to be following the instructions that Stephanie recommends in the process. More so, a good thing to note here is that if you are baking and you're starting a new recipe and you know nothing about the recipe, you want to start by doing all the things that are recommended as best as possible, sticking with the ingredient listings and measurements and the accurate instructions. So Stephanie asked that we preheat our oven to 180 degrees C, which I believe is the case here. And Stephanie employs a few processes. In my own research and observing her instruction, a few things I found out that I want to be able to touch on so that you can get the best out of it. But she's a solid hand when it comes to baking, so you want to check her out. But I have some funny story to tell about my pineapple upside down cake. I'll be telling you all that and what happened to my cherries here. Okay, so to start with, we have a selection of ingredients here. To stop things from being moved around, I have already set the pot up over saucepan up over some heat here. The intention is to melt some soft brown sugar here with some butter, which will go into the base of our pan, over which the pineapple will go before the cake batter goes. Stephanie also employs a few techniques here for this cake, which is really exciting. It's a butter cake recipe. The intention for the idea of a pineapple upside down cake is simply a selection of pineapple slices on the base with some caramel underneath. When you invert it, you have the caramel sauce coming over it, but it's essentially caramel and pineapple, which is over a batter cake, if you like. So she starts with some butter. She recommends salted or unsalted, whatever takes your fancy. I didn't have unsalted butter, and I didn't fancy the trick of getting myself unsalted butter. Plus, I like a touch of salt in my recipes, just so that it gives me a more enhanced and complex taste. So that's okay. So I have salted butter here, which is going to go in the saucepan. The idea here is to melt this over heat. I like the smell of brown butter, but we're not browning this. We're just melting this just enough so that we can also have the soft brown sugar into this, right? So we'll stir that all in together. Essentially, we want to melt the soft brown sugar and butter together until it's bubbling on the side. So it takes the form of some caramel, if you like. Here, I have never tried this before, so I really don't know what to expect. But like I said, Stephanie is a solid hand when it comes to baking, a very experienced baker with a wealth of knowledge to share, and I find her guidance and instructions are very easy to follow also. So, and she employs some very home techniques, like easy techniques and processes that one can solidly rely on. So I highly recommend her channel. You can check her out. With that said, one thing I found, she recommended that the pan she was using was, I think, a 9-inch to a 9-inch pan, 2 inches high. So it was a flat pan essentially. I don't have that. If you've been on this channel before, you will find that I bake my recipes in deep pans. My cake recipes are optimized for deep pan baking, so they bake tall and then I level and stack. So as a result of that, I don't have flat pans at all. So what I've done is, instead of using her 9-inch, I decided to go for the 8-inch pan, which I have a 10-inch, but I was also worried the butter will spread thin in the would spread thin in the pan and will not fill it up. So I have chosen to go for the 8-inch, which I hope will help. In that case, I've also then decided that because I don't have a lighting, because when I looked at the recipes of pineapple upside down, one of the risks is that if you don't butter your pan very well, or depending on how your cake cooks, I am just hoping I don't trigger my fire alarm here because of this smoke, because the fire alarm here in my home is super sensitive, and I am worried because I've got the windows closed to keep the light in and now I am very worried that the smoke is likely to trigger my fire alarm. Whilst we're at it, I should also say that I'm expecting some deliveries, so if you hear a knock on my door then it's my Amazon delivery man. I know there are some viewers in the chats there. Hello there and hi to all of you. There is quite a few moving parts to today's tasks. And on the live, what we do is super task centered. I have to check the melting of the sugar and butter so that it doesn't smoke up and trigger my alarm, which will send us into a crisis. So if you have anything to say to me, hello there. I welcome you to the chat. It's a pleasure to have you. I wonder if Amanda is here. I did leave a comment for her and also left a post in my community post to announce being here. Look, I have commitment issues, so anything that has to let me commit to something makes me question my own abilities. So whilst I enjoy these lives because they are so interactive, they are so fun, I would love to make it a consistent program so that I can come to all the time. Perhaps set a specific date or days in the week and times, but I just, the commitment scares me. So yesterday, just as a matter of courtesy, because this is Amanda's choice, I left her a comment to say, look, Amanda, this is what I'm doing today. But no pressure. If she could come, great. If she couldn't, look, we will eat the cake on her behalf. Having said that, I was like, well, we're starting at 11:30. It turns out we're here a little earlier. So if Amanda is here, she'll keep you engaged in the chat. And if she isn't, it's fine. I'll finish my task and then I'll come and talk to you in the chat. Okay. Well, our caramel sort of sugar, brown sugar and butter caramel here is sort of melted. Can you see what we have here? I don't have a flat saucepan. Traditionally, this recipe is made in a skillet. I don't have a skillet either. So we're just going to make do of what we have. What I was saying about my pan is that I went for an 8-inch pan, but because it's a tall pan, and sometimes some of the recipes I have seen also says that depending on how the bake goes, trying to invert your bake can get stuck, and then you will have to kind of clean it and lift it up. Because this is a deeper pan, lifting it up might be slightly difficult for me. So I have proactively tried to initiate solving that problem by lining my tin slightly. But the rest of it is completely battered so that the butter doesn't stick. But I think we are done with this sort of what we're doing here. This is our sauce now. And what I'm going to do is pour that right into the base. Amanda tells me she mixes butter with brown sugar and rubs the pan with it. I could have done that, but I was feeling a little bit lazy. So I wonder if I can do that now, because I also find that the caramel isn't coming off as I would like. Some of it is sticking, which is annoying, because it means that the quantity I want is kind of limited here. But we're going to just clean that up now. I am excited to see what we will have eventually. I was also concerned that depending on the quantity that is recommended, I don't end up with a heavy bake, because I didn't want a big cake, because we're going to be undertaking more bakes in the week. And the more I bake, the more cake is left in my home. And there's only so many times that you can give cakes away to family and friends and people around you. And I struggle to come up with ways to give away the cake. Seems like such a small problem to have, isn't it? Well, I think that's all there is to it here. That's our pan, right? So probably leave that on the side. And what I'm going to do here is try and spread. Well, okay, I'm just going to leave that. The caramel is sort of, it's hardening up slightly. So the next thing is to try and arrange the pineapple in the tin. Now, these are pineapples I bought in a tin. They are pineapple slices in juice. I picked them up from my local supermarket. In the UK here, it's Tesco. But you can pick that from anywhere. And I drained the water. You can keep the water for something else, maybe a smoothie. I think I've just accidentally poured mine away. I added half of it to the milk, which I will be using, and I'll be talking you through that in a moment. But I accidentally poured the rest of it away, which is sort of annoying me now. But you can pick that up, drain the fluid out of it. I think we have 6 here, but I want another one so that it will fit in the corner here. But I should say I struggle to find the maraschino cherries in Tesco. I spoke to a manager who couldn't find me those. Turns out they are cocktail cherries that are artificially enhanced in color to give them the super red looking color that they have. And they can be soaked in sugar syrup or alcohol, but I couldn't find them. So I decided that I guess if you use those cherries, they give a very nice look to the pineapple upside down, and I really wanted to go for that. I don't care for glazed cherries or any of that, and maraschino cherries are not glazed. They are just cherries that are made and preserved for cocktail or stuff like that. So I couldn't find them, and I thought I will pick up fresh cherries from Tesco. Problem is that the cherries I picked still have pits in it. So I don't know how that is going to work in itself, but for the aesthetics of what I am going for, I want to be able to try that. However, I should say, I like fresh cherries. I like the texture of them. So I bought a full pack and I found myself eating them. That's the story about me and cherries. So I've eaten much of my cherries. So I'm just going to stick the ones that I cut into 2 just so that I don't have the pits in the cake. But this is more for the color, aesthetics of it. I am not really fast. You could do without the cherries, to be honest. So if you can't find cherries, don't be too bogged down by it. But I just wanted it to add a bit of color. It's not the same as using the maraschino cherries though, so bear that in mind. Perhaps next time I will order this online if I have to order them from Amazon. But I just wanted to bring that color element here, so don't shoot me for using these ones over here. It's just to add a little bit of something into these ones. So I have done that, but I guess I'll save the rest for me to eat later. I've eaten much of it already, so that is something to bear in mind. Now we'll be moving on to the sponge shortly. There are quite some interesting recipes I found, and I found that making the pineapple upside down is such a classic. There is no one way to make it right. Essentially, the features of it is that you make sure you have your fruit, below you have the sauce that will drip over it when you invert it. But most importantly, you want to make sure that your sponge is lightly textured on the cake. You don't want a heavily dense cake that will separate from the fruit. So however else or whatever process and technique you employ, ultimately these are the things you should be looking out for. I have seen recipes that use exclusively the batter cake method and then creaming all together, and some that have also employed elements or properties of the sponge cake method to enhance the texture, the light texture in this cake. So in neither one is better than the other. At the end of the day, what is most important is for you to have an understanding of the process you're using, why you're using the ingredient selection, and how they affect each other. So back to the tin, we have our pineapples lined in this, and underneath we have, because our cherries are not whole as we should have it, they are coming off, but it's neither here nor there. Just to give you a look into the tin over here, you'll find the cherries flying over, but hey, it's one of these things. The thing about this particular recipe is that it is so versatile and it is so easy and adaptable, and it's a classic. So the idea of trying to keep things super perfect is out of the window on this one. So I'm going to move the stand mixer across, and we are going to for the quantity that we are going to be making. I could have employed the hand mixer here, but I'll tell you one reason why I am opting for the stand mixer. That is because I will be requiring the hand mixer for beating the eggs, and because it's a live, I didn't feel like I had the opportunity to wash up and come back and do other things, and I also didn't want to start the process completely without you in it. So that is something to bear in mind. So the quantity here is so small that we could actually complete this using a hand mixer. So for future references, if you don't have a stand mixer at home right now, don't worry, you can do this with a complete hand mixer, and that should be fine. There is, I think it's about 200 grams of sugar here, and 113 grams of salted butter. I am using salted butter, so adding salt to my ingredients has been completely eliminated. Now I am going to add vanilla extract here. We don't measure our vanilla here, but like I said, this is Stephanie's recipe, and I'll leave exact quantities in the description box below. So I am going to cream this very quickly. The creaming method here is you want to be able to beat these together, the sugar and the butter together, and to add some air bubbles into it so that it helps with the rising of the cake when it eventually goes to bake. But the good thing about using butter here is that butter is extremely flavorful. I like margarine for its texture and ability to be light because it uses vegetable fat. But for this cake, I think we will be compromising on flavor if we went for margarine. Now, our butter and sugar has been creaming for a few minutes now, and we have seen the butter changed. The consistency is still like a little bit tight here. If it was we were comparing this to margarine, we would have a little lighter taste here, but texture here, I'm sorry. But if you look at the granulated sugar, you can see that it's a bit gritty, and you can see the granulated sugar here more in the mixture, whereas if we were using caster sugar, it will be a little subtle, if you like. So the differences are obvious, but in terms of structural difference, it's not that much whether you're using granulated sugar or caster sugar. And like I said, this is such a classic cake that we're not aiming for perfection here. Now, before we add the eggs, Stephanie employed a few different techniques here I just want to touch on quickly. So I'm going to leave that in there whilst I talk you through this really quickly. She separated her eggs. She recommended 2 large eggs. Now, if you've been on this channel before, you'll find that I try to eliminate the use of 2 large eggs, 2 medium eggs, because even 2 large eggs don't weigh the same in grams. And in baking, precision is really, really key. So I try to eliminate that. So guess what I found? Because I was trying to do her recipe justice, I thought I'll stick to her recommendation. So guess what? I picked 2 large eggs and then I weighed it shelled. Guess how much the weighed egg gave me? It gave me 67 grams. Now I broke the eggs into two. I think on her recipe she says 40 grams, 2 large eggs. When you break and separate it, you have 60 grams of egg whites and 40 grams of egg yolk. She uses them separately, which I will be talking you through in a moment. But let me just touch on the subject of what I found. So I weighed the eggs with the shell, 67 grams, one. Okay, I split the eggs and then I weighed the egg whites, and guess how much the egg white gave me? 33 grams for one and 34 grams for the other. So that was 67 for 2 egg white, yet her recipe called for 60 grams 2 eggs. So can we see the difference here? There's a 7-gram difference here that the eggs doesn't guarantee. Perhaps when she was testing her recipe, her 2 eggs gave her the 60-gram measurements. However, when I tried 2 large eggs in the UK here, these are the Tesco free range large eggs, and the 2 egg whites gave me 67 grams of egg whites. Now she said for the egg yolks there's 40 grams for the 2. I weighed the egg yolk from the egg whites, and both of them gave me, one gave me 17 grams each, one gave me 16 grams. So the 2 definitely didn't make up for 40 grams. So I say that to say it's not that she's wrong or anything. This is a classic recipe that is so adaptable. It can handle a few differences in ingredients measurements here. So you don't technically have to be completely precise. There's not much to this recipe, but perhaps if you're doing a cake or baking a particular recipe that requires on the precision of its ingredients, you want to be very careful. So my advice or recommendation, if needed, is that for eggs, ensure that you get the full gram measurements where necessary and avoid the use of 2. There are recipes that are very adaptable that you can employ the 2-3 eggs. My chocolate cake recipe, for instance, calls for, say, 2 eggs. I have gone, depending on how I have used the recipe, I've gone for 4 eggs, and it has made completely no difference adversely to the recipe. But for other things, you want to be very careful. So the idea of 2-3 large eggs is not something I am completely fond of, but that's a tangent. Let's go back to baking. So for that reason, I ended up cracking 1 extra egg to add the yolk, and we have 42 grams instead of 40. I thought I'm not going to scoop out 2 grams just to get the exact measurements here. So because I am using her recipe, this information is important, so that if we ended up with a bake that is not as good as hers, the blame is not on her. So I just wanted you to know that, so that if you do take this recipe with you, you will know that these are the things to look out for over here, right? So the egg is going to go in here. The egg is going to go in here, and I am just going to start creaming that slightly. Yeah? And then I will also be telling you a bit about the liquid ingredients in this recipe. Now, whilst that is mixing here, something Stephanie did differently. Something Stephanie did differently was to beat the egg whites. So what I am going to do is let this keep creaming, and then I am going to beat the egg whites. she added cream of tartar, about a gram into the egg white. Cream of tartar is an acid that unsticks egg white proteins and helps them to whip up well. So I've just added cream of tartar here. Elizabeth, you're asking me a question. I'll come back to you in a moment. Bear with me. Okay, in our attempt to multitask, we want to be careful because when we whip the egg whites, we want to be able to use them immediately after whipping so that they don't deflate, right? So the eggs have gone in here and it's time to add the butter. So I've just left the egg white here, but I'm also like concerned that in trying to multitask, I don't introduce any oil over here because oil in the egg whites kind of ruins the whole thing for me. So I'm going to be very careful and I have to remind myself of that fact, right? So now it's time to add the flour. I opted for self-raising flour, people. When she used in the original recipe, there is plain or plain flour or all-purpose flour that she adds rising ingredients to, which is baking powder or baking soda. If you've been on this channel, I've told you my use of rising agent hasn't always gone to plan. So I've opted for self-raising flour. This is the Mcdougalls brand of self-raising flour. It promises a lighter bake. So because we are optimizing for the sponge to be light on the cake, I have gone for that. Also in my hand here is some milk. The milk is mixed with some of the pineapple juice that came in the tin of pineapple juice I got. I'll leave all the information about what I've used here and the exact quantities, but it is exactly what Stephanie used, except where there are adaptations, I will make note of that in the description box. We want to be quick not to overmix our batter here. The good thing is that the mixer here is has a fold function, which means it is able to mix the batter without overmixing. You can slow it right down. It's the fold function. And the mixer here I am using is the Kenwood K-Mix. I have done a full length review of this mixer. It's a thorough review and I bought this myself. So just in case you're wondering, this is not an ad for you of any sort at all. Now, the most significant thing about this batter, Stephanie says, is a very thick batter. But what we are also going to do is that we are going to employ the use of the egg white to lighten this batter a little bit and add some more air bubbles so that we can achieve the lighter texture here. And that's a combination of, even though this is a butter cake, so we've used the creamy method to cream it, we've added the self-raising flour, which has added leavening to it. The other thing here is that we have employed the properties of the sponge cake method, where you whip the egg whites and then introduce it into your batter to add the lift or leavening to your cake. We are employing that to enhance the quality of structure here, which is super light texture. So I'm going to beat that very quickly. Okay, now something important we need to know here. When we are beating the eggs, we want to make sure that it is at stiff peaks. But the idea of stiff peaks when you are beating just egg whites as compared to when the egg white has sugar is very different. You don't want to overmix it and then break down the structure. So this is just about enough, because you can see it turns so foamy, and the idea is that the foam holds what air bubbles, and the air bubbles, if introduced into the batter in a way that doesn't completely deflate it, should enhance the rise of the cake and giving us a very light texture. So what I'm going to do here is I'm gonna get this off over here, and I'm going to get the bowl out, move that out of the way. So the batter here is sort of a thick batter, but I guess mine isn't as thick as when I watched the recipe of her doing it. The reason being, I am using self-raising flour here. So we are going to add just a half of the egg whites, and over here we want to be careful not to deflate the egg white. So what we're doing is we're turning it in, and then we mixing it in, the cutting through in the middle, because if we start stirring the mixture all together, we might end up breaking the egg whites here. So yeah, there this goes. So yeah, we're still adding with the egg whites going in, we can tell the butter is loosening up, but we want to be extremely careful here. And the moment the mixture, we can't see egg whites, we are done. Okay, if we can't see egg whites, that's it, we are done. I can see a bit of egg whites at the top, and yeah, that's it, we are done here. So we are back. I think I'm excited about this bake, and I'm equally nervous. So we are putting our butter in here. Because it's not something, because I'm not aiming for perfection here, I am like, whatever. But if it comes out bad, I will be like, oh damn, what have I done? Because even though I don't know the results of the bake, I guess I have a selfish interest to make sure that it is right, because I purport to be a baker, and so it should be all right. Anyway, I'll get a knife here. Okay. Right. Normally I will stamp, you know what? Normally I will stamp this, but I'm not going to do that because we are relying on a lighter bake. I'll show you what the pan looks like on the inside. And here's the moment of truth where we leave this thing in the oven to bake, and we hope it doesn't get sticky on the sides, and we can invert this perfectly and get a great bake. So I'm going to leave that in the oven. We're going to look at the time. Bakes for any time, I think 40 minutes to 55 minutes, somewhere in the time scale, but we'll probably safely say about 40 minutes, and then we'll add another 15 minutes on top. So it's exactly it's exactly 9 minutes past 12. We should be back at 12:50 to see, but anyway. Our cake should be baking at 180 degrees C for any time from 40 to 55 minutes. So our cake is now in. Normally over here, this is what we do. I understand that for a live presentation, we could undertake the bake separately and then introduce it for the purposes of time management. But if you've been here before, one of the things we hope to experience is that we undertake the entire bake, and then we see what we've baked, just so that there is a real sense and authenticity to the process. So what we see and do here is exactly what you're going to see when we finish baking. So in the past, what I've done is we've done the bake, closed the chat, gone away, come back, and then see the bake, right? That is if we have time, because sometimes within the live, what we do is that I answer viewer questions, we interact and engage on baking subjects and all other things. So depending on what subjects we are discussing and what that looks like, eventually we overrun the time in the session, and then it coincides with the bake, and then we've just turned on the bake right on the live. It's a longer session, but it's also equally exciting. I hope that will be the case for today. But in other alternatives of that, what we have done is the session is closed, I tidy up, and then perhaps 10 minutes before the bake is done, I come back and then we see the results of the bake live when I take it from the oven. But it all depends on what we are engaging about, what we are talking about, what our questions and answers is. And sometimes I realize that some of you are passing through and you stop by and it's a work day and you're unable to stay in the chat for longer. So all of that will determine the result of how this live will be, because being here for 40 minutes waiting for the cake to be done can be a very long time. Elizabeth was asking about the mixer I was using. I'm using the Kenwood. If you want to know a bit more about mixers, I'm using the Kenwood K-Mix here. I did an unboxing of the mixer when I first got it. And I think 2 years, 18 months later, I could be wrong, but the information is all on the channel. 18 months later, I came back and did a review of the use of the mixer in its entirety. Point of note here, I paid for this mixer myself. All my mixers I bought myself. This was £199 from, I think, a Black Friday sale on AO.com. So, but the retail is about £259, sort of. Convert it in the dollar range, and I don't know, but it will be a little over. Having said that, it's a great mixer to have. I love the mixer. I have had complaints about the glass, but I have insured it against cracking, so that's beside the point. But it's I wouldn't say it is super affordable, but it's also like a beginner entry level. If you can pick one up, it will serve you. So I have the detailed information about the mixer. In fact, when I undertook that review, what I did was I reviewed all the parts. My research on YouTube when I wanted to buy the mixer myself was very limited. So when I bought the mixer, my hope was to cover the aspects of the review on the platform that is not available. So I literally took time and reviewed it in the way that it will be used in its true form. So I made buttercream using the whisk, which is what I was using mine for mostly. I made a cake using the paddle attachment, and then I made some pizza with the dough hook. I did say that I wasn't keen on the dough hook. I didn't like the spatula very much, and I'm not keen on using the splash guard. But besides that or anything else, it's an amazing mixer to have. Now, for the price of what that mixer is, if you can't afford this, I did another review on the Okma. It's the Okma mixer. Entry-level mixer, a little over £100. As of the time I was doing that review, it had come to £109 on Amazon, but I bought mine for £99, I believe. All that information is on the platform, as in on my homepage. You should check that out. I'll link it in the description box. Great mixers to have. The Okma has its own small limitations in that it is very plasticky, but don't let the plastic nature of the Okma fool you. The speed dial is a little bit not here, but for a beginner, if you're not undertaking larger bakes, it should serve you well. Because when I did the review, I did it I think 2 years after purchase, and the reason why I leave it that long is it gives me time. you know, because these electrical gadgets and equipments come with some sort of warranty, right? So you want to make sure that the information and its reliability is something people can actually vouch for. So as a result of that, I don't do the reviews immediately after I bought it, because what is my experience of use there, you know? So I leave it for so long, just so that there is like a enough time and use for me to be able to come back and review that for you. So for that, I will recommend that for you to check. Anytime Bakes is asking about buttercream without eggs. Okay, just for some context, I suppose the buttercream without eggs is well, the subject of buttercream is wide when it comes to baking cakes, right? Not all cakes would require buttercream, but I think of buttercream as say the sauce to your burger, if you like. And whilst there are some great buttercreams to consider when baking, for instance, there are some considerations one has to almost like think about when you're choosing a certain type of buttercream. Purposely, because you have to think about what the buttercream is for. What need are you needing the buttercream to meet, right? And every baker would love to have a buttercream that is optimized for stable structure. Oh my goodness, wouldn't we all love that? But for some reason, I don't care what you say, buttercream is not meant to stay stable for a long time, okay? But the stability within a certain time range is variable, right? You have some that will collapse on you. French buttercream, one of those. They will collapse on you at a little bit of heat and they're gone. All gone. So French buttercream, no. But if you went for, say, your Ermine or Italian buttercream, those are solid. But it doesn't mean they are so solid that they will stay stable even in heat conditions. There is like a spectrum of heat that a buttercream stability can sustain. So let's be realistic here. But even with the stability of buttercreams that you can choose from, the other thing is that there are people with dietary preferences and allergies and specific dietary needs. There are people who can't eat eggs. So what do? If Italian buttercream is sourced as the most stable buttercream amongst the selection of buttercreams, what do you do if the client doesn't eat eggs? Does it mean that they have to settle for a less than stable buttercream? So the search for a stable buttercream to meet any and every preference is actually a thing. And I love the subject of buttercream, which I have tackled right here on this channel. I have had live multiple tutorials on the subject of Swiss meringue buttercream, which is my favorite. But yes, anytime Bakes want us to find a buttercream that is optimized for stability without eggs, I think American buttercream probably takes a lead on that one for that matter. But there are tricks you want to apply to your American buttercream so that it's stable. Now, let me just stop it myself a moment, breathe, and then I'll touch on the subject. American buttercream is known to be very sweet. It has its good and bad, like most things in baking. The positives of American buttercream is that it is very stable in terms of structure. Doesn't compare to Italian buttercream, but it is good in terms of structure. However, it's notorious for being too sweet and also can be grated depending on what sugar you use. The recipes varies. You have the 1-to-1 ratios, you have the 1-to-2. But I find that I'll tell you here right now that the 1-to-2 ratio, if you don't know what a 1-to-2 ratio is, when 1 part of butter, doesn't matter how much, so it's a 1 part of butter is added to 2 parts of sugar. So for instance, you have 100 grams of butter, salted, unsalted, doesn't matter. That goes with 200 grams of icing sugar. So the amount of butter you take, you add to twice the same amount of sugar. Now that is going to be incredibly sweet. So what I have found in my experience, I don't make American buttercream a lot because I haven't had a need for it because my customers prefer Swiss and French. However, If I made American buttercream, I have employed techniques to reduce the problem spots of American buttercream for me. For instance, I don't go for the 1-to-1, 1-to-2 ratio. I go for a 1-to-1 ratio, which is 1 part of sugar to the same part of butter. And actually, fun fact, you can always tailor your buttercream and adapt your recipes to meet a particular need you are going for. So bear that in mind. So if you're new in baking, here's some information for you to know. It is always a good thing to have an understanding of your baking ingredients. You may not be a scientist, and I am not. But the thing that will serve you in baking is for you to have an understanding of your ingredient selection, how they interact with each other, and how reducing or increasing them can enhance your prospects for you or affect things adversely. So when I see tutorials where a baker or a tutor is teaching, say, buttercream and goes for a 1-to-2 ratio, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to stick with that. You have to determine what works for you and go with that. But normally, sometimes when you watch those tutorials, that information is not readily available. So I'm telling you here and now that if you find American buttercream too sweet, you don't have to go for a 1-to-2 ratio at all. There's no need for it. There is no reason for it. You can tailor it down, but it also comes with certain accommodations you have to make. So for instance, I go for 1 part of butter to this equal part of sugar. So 100 grams of sugar to 100 grams of butter. I have actually in some cases reduced the butter, the sugar by 25 grams. So 100 grams of butter to 75 grams of sugar. When you start adapting things like that, you have to be very, very careful, because if you don't understand how the reduction affects mouthfeel, then you're likely to end up with a different result that is against what you were originally hoping for. I hope that makes sense. So back to the tips that can reduce your American buttercream for you. American buttercream can be, you can adapt the recipe, but you can also add a bit of salt. Sometimes people have recommended the use of salted butter. When you use salted butter, you lose control of the amount of salt, because different brands add the varying quantities of salt to their butter. So my recommendation is to go for unsalted butter and add a pinch of salt to your buttercream. What salt does is that it balances out the sugar, the sweetness of the sugar, and stabilizes the taste and mouthfeel, adding a more enhanced and complex tasting buttercream. So you can adapt the salt to your own preference. Another thing you can do is that you can then, when you mix the buttercream, leave it to chill and add a touch, like a spoonful of warm water. What warm water is that sugar melts, right? So when you add warm water, it dissolves the sugar. So it gives you a finer finish. So you know what? Talking about it, perhaps I'll come back and do my American buttercream recipe, the techniques I use to get best results and great tasting buttercream. I will employ all of that, and then we will cover a cake. We'll check for how smooth the buttercream is. We'll check for how best the mouth feel and taste is, and then you can pick yourself a recipe to go away with. How does that sound? Let me know if you would like to see that tutorial, and I'll be back to talk to you about it. I have my recent video up about a series that I developed. I'll tell you all about it. We had a whole series where, remember when I started this live, I explained that I only started this live because I was starting a baking session where a couple had come for a cake tasting, and they just wanted the recipes, the cake tasting a little lighter. Now, that is a whole different subject to go into, right? Because when you're a business, you want to maintain consistency of product. And the consistency of product is your cake. You don't want person A to buy your cake, enjoy the same cake, and then recommends you to person B, and then person B comes and then they feel like the same cake they ate is not the same, right? You want to make sure your ingredient listing are the same, quantities are the same, and you can maintain trace. There are moving parts to running a business. So when I developed my recipe, I optimized it for certain needs, right? If you like, say, bakery style cakes that are super light, very textured, and cannot withstand holding buttercream or heavy stacking, then I am not the baker for you. However, when this couple came, I just thought it would be a learning opportunity to kind of delve into the viewpoint of clients who feel limited by certain bakes that they do not like. So as a result, I thought I will undertake adapting my own recipe and then see if I can optimize the recipe to their needs. And that is what started as a series of videos on this channel on the live, where I came and I baked with different sorts of flour, including cake flour. Now, having said that, I wasn't promising the couple an impossible choice. I wasn't also setting myself up for a fall, because it's important that whatever you are promising or intending to do, there is also a gain to you as a business. I realized that as a cake business or custom cake maker, there are a select number of people who I may not be able to tailor my business to, and that's okay. I'm not out here winning everybody, but this was the one chance that I thought it would be a learning opportunity for me. So I undertook the whole process. We developed the series, which is what has become now an ongoing thing. And I'm super, 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 super grateful for that. However, the bride, even after 3 choices of cake tastings, she didn't like the texture. And I discussed my perspective, disappointment, and give my overall feeling about that in a recent video. You want to check that out in the homepage videos. It was uploaded. It's my most recent video from, I think, Sunday. So you want to check that out. Having said that, I ended up posting that experience in a few caking groups, and it invited a lot of chatter. And I was quite fascinated by how many businesses actually feel so entitled to and as not just entitled, but are so close to their product that they do not see outside of that at all. I was quite surprised by a few people who criticized the fact that I even opted to give this clients an option. I was very surprised by that. No, I understand that when your experience is such that customers have taken advantage of the product that you are serving them through the tasting, then yes, it can be an awfully difficult thing and very harrowing that you don't. So when you see someone doing the same thing, you almost think, why would you? And I completely get that sentiment. But I also said to them that the reason why I opted to give them a choice is not because they forced me to. It was my choice to, and that is because I had something to gain from it. So it's not like as a business I went out of my way to do this thing for somebody who didn't appreciate it. That wasn't the feeling at all. And I think it was difficult to kind of communicate that intention, and it was hard to kind of engage in the conversation when I realized that people are like, oh, because the bride turned the tastings down, she was perhaps difficult. I didn't think she was difficult. I actually think it was a case of either her understanding of cakes being so misconstrued. I'll explain. There are different cake sponges on the market. There are different sources of cakes that you can find. You can find cake in your high street shop. You can go to a custom bakery that uses a specialty ingredients or box mix for you. There are so many things you can find on the market. I find that customers do not know a lot about cakes at all. They don't. All they want is this sweet thing for a good day that they just want to have something to eat. And that is completely fine. And if that is the sentiment customers are carrying, it's not their fault that they have come to eat a certain cake and they don't think they like it. Food is very, very subjective. What you may find a good pleasant food, somebody may not find extremely pleasant as you, but might have some difference to it, you know. How many times have a friend recommended, say, a burger? That's the closest example I can give. Say someone recommends a nice restaurant, like the food is good. And then you go to the restaurant, you're like, what kind of food is that? They're not saying the food is bad. The food doesn't hit, it's not a hit with them like it is with you. And as a business, we should be open to that intention. Now, whether we are willing to give more options, it's a question of what you want to do. And if you don't want to give the customer an option, that is fine. But it's also like incredibly difficult to think that if you are limiting your options for what the client needs by sticking to your viewpoint, how are you going to grow in a business? It is almost 40 minutes past 12. We got our bake in at 10 past 12. So 40 past 12, that's half an hour. So we are, is it 10 minutes out? 10, 11 minutes out. So that is really exciting. So I'm going to have a peek and then we'll come back. Well, the issue here is that I am using a taller tin and my oven glass is a little dark, so I can't see in the oven. So I'm gonna have to trust the process and let the bake and happen for the next 11 minutes, and then we can check on it. One thing, our community page, as in the community post, is super interactive. What I do with the community post is I try to use the community post to serve you by elaborating on posts or information that has been missed in the live chat or in various videos. So if you are here, keep an eye on our community post. It has ton of super useful information over there. There's like daily catch-ups or lives about things that are not cake related, about me as a baker, my experiences and stuff. All of those are to keep connected and keep you informed. But the goal of the community post is to use it as a source of reliable information where we elaborate on some baking things, including baking ingredients. So for instance, I posted the ingredients for what we are using today in photo forms on the community page. So if you're in the chat here, ensure that you can keep an eye on our community page where we can keep ourselves updated with information. Our pineapple upside down is actually coming along. We have 4 minutes to go, but I keep saying 4 minutes, which is not. The time for the pineapple upside down is not exactly as 4 minutes because the noted time is about 40 minutes, but that is like on the lowest of the time scale. You want to leave another 5 minutes, but essentially you put a skewer in the sponge and it comes out clean, you're done. We have a cake stand here and we have our plate here. We have a knife. This is going to be exciting. Who is as excited as I am with this pineapple upside down cake? I am really excited about this one. It's been 40 minutes since our cake went in. So I'm probably going to take a chance. And because what we don't want to do is we don't want to overbake our cake. And we also don't want it to fall apart whilst it's in there. So it's been 40 minutes. I'll check and see. And if it falls apart, that's on me. Oh, it looks good, but I don't know if it's done yet. Okay, so I'm gonna put a skewer in it and then we'll see. Well, unfortunately, it is still a bit runny in the middle, so we don't know yet. So what I'm probably going to do to save it, so that because we have the caramel underneath, we don't want the caramel to overcook We don't want the caramel to overcook, but we also don't want the cake to overcook as well. So at this point, what I might do is that I'm going to put a foil over the cake itself so that it can retain the heat in the middle. And then I'm going to put some water in the bottom of the pan so that it serves as a cooling system in the oven. That should help it. But I am kind of a little bit worried about this one, just slightly. And that is because probably that's on my, because I substituted the plain flour that she recommended for self-raising flour, which is why you should stick with the original ingredients, and her tin that she recommended to use. I used a completely different tin. These seem like very small things, but the use of a different kind of flour can affect the outcomes of a bake. So I won't so much encourage it, but these are ways you can mitigate the problems that may arise. So what I'm going to do is put a foil over the cake so that the heat is retained in it. This is after 40 minutes. And I have also put some water on in a tray, just a little bit, just so that it cools the oven, so that the oven is not cooking the cake vigorously. Because on this note, I can see the edges of the cake itself is done going in, but the inside is not done. So we want to be able to slow the process down without overcooking and burning the cake, whilst also not overcooking the caramel. So that is what I have done now. Somebody was asking me whether I like to freeze my cakes or not. I answered that question in detail for them, but just to clarify some of the suggestions I gave. Freezing cakes is neither here nor there. In the business of baking, there is a whole thing about whether you should freeze your cakes, and people feel a bit iffy about frozen cakes. Look, freezing cakes can enhance moisture. There's a whole science to this that helps to enhance moisture. However, the thing that will work against you when you freeze your cakes is the environment within which you save your cakes. If your cakes are kept in an environment where there are strong smelling substances or food elements, then cake will absorb those smells, which will affect the quality of taste and mouthfeel for you, right? Because I don't want to eat a cake that tastes like that, smells like cheese, if you like, right? But the significance of that may be subtle until the end point when a particular cake to the circumstances present to me at the exact time. Do I need to always freeze the cake? It's not part of my process. I don't necessarily have to freeze my cakes. But freezing cakes can also be important and good for time management. Say if you have a lot of bakes to undertake from, say, a week next week, and there's so much to do, then why not bake your cake and freeze them? So I take it on a case-by-case basis. But freezing your cakes is not necessarily a one stroke solution for all things cake. You also have to check the recipe and make sure that your recipe can freeze well. Some recipes, when I have frozen a lemon cake and then it came out, it was so soft, it was crumbly, because the moisture was enhanced to the point where it ended up making the cake a little bit doughy, if you like. So there are several things to consider when freezing a cake, but freezing a cake is not a bad thing, and you can make further considerations to enhance the outcome of when you freeze your cakes. So I hope that is a great tip for you to have on whether you can freeze your cakes or not. For instance, for my process, generally the cake lasts for up to about, let's say, 48 hours in my from bake time to collection. I bake one day, leave it on a countertop to set, and then next day, so say I could bake a cake 2 a.m. like today, 2 a.m. and then I start the decoration like next day about 10 a.m. So 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. the cake is still fairly fresh. So what I do then to enhance the structure of the cake, because you don't want to build or stack up a fresh cake, it will collapse on you. So what I do then with a cake like that is, I sometimes cut it up and then put it in a fridge. Fridge will dry out your cake depending on how much you keep it saved in the fridge. So if I want the cake to chill for quickly for me, or the crumb to set solid a little bit, I put it in the fridge for maybe, let's say, up to about 40 minutes to an hour, so that it is chilled. And then I stack the cake up, especially if I'm stacking the cake up for close to fresh. But as best as possible, I try not to stack up fresh cakes. And as soon as you finish your bake, leave it on the countertop for up to 10 minutes. It will look as though it is cooling, because when you take the cake out of the fridge, it is very, very delicate. So any attempt at handling the cake at that point in time is a risk to the cake. It will fall apart. So if you leave it to cool, maybe about 10 minutes, it will allow it to firm up and gain some structure. After that, just wrap the cake warm, leave it on a countertop. If you leave it on a countertop, the moisture that comes from the heat will not evaporate and dissipate, drying your cake out in the process. It will go back into the cake. It will give you a lightly softer crumb, and the texture of the cake will be better. So bake your cakes, leave it on a countertop, and then work on them the next day. What are your processes? Essentially, I am talking about the processes that enhance my results for me, and I hope you find some value in that. So our bake has been in from 12:40, and our bake has been in from 12:40. It's now nearly 1:05. So that's about 20 minutes. So let's have a look at what it looks like. Right. Oh, okay. Oh, people. People. I'm excited. Okay. If you've been on this channel before, you will find that I cannot hide my excitement when our cake goes right. Okay? So I'm going to show you what we have here. First of all, I dipped they say when you dip a skewer in and it comes out clean, but clean is overcooked apparently if it comes out a bit dry. But Stephanie says if it's beginning to come off the side of the bowl, if it's beginning to pull out from the side, then you have a good one, right? So that's where we are at. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm probably going to leave that for another 5 minutes so we can get ourselves out, so that the top will crust a little bit, and then we'll come back and take our cake out. But if you're joining, okay, yes, look. So if you want to see what our bake is after, and you know what, the flavor is so good. Right, we'll put that back in for another 5, just so that we can tidy up. So I think it's about time we take our cake now. Right, so if you want to see what the cake looks like, I like to show the insides of the cake here. So this is what the cake looks like on the inside. Oh, it's done. Oh, I love it. Right? It's, oh gosh, this is so good. I think sometimes people say leave it for 10 minutes to cool before you invert it. Because I have the baking thing on the bottom. Oh wow! Okay, people, what do we think? Whew, this is good. This is so good, but it is so hot. I want to eat some cake, but I'm scared. Oh, thank you. Oh, Broskino, thank you. Broskino, where are you joining us from? Where are you? Oh, God. People. Mmm. 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 The flavor of this cake is next to nothing. It's amazing. The salted butter. Mmm. Amanda, thank you. This is Amanda's special. Mmm. Where have I been? Broskino from London. Hiya. It's a pleasure to have you. Oh, people, can we see the cake? Look, this cake looks amazing. Mmm. Ah, look, I want to eat a cake now. Okay? Mmm. Mmm. Okay. Right. Now, can we do the taste test? Okay. I'm going to get myself a small plate. Amanda, this is for you. You know what? I should confess that when I saw the recipe, I wasn't fond of it because I'm not fond of classic cakes. But oh my goodness. I kind of feel like, will I ruin it if I had custard on it? It is hot, but my greedy self. Look, I think, whew, I don't know what to say. It's good. It is a good cake. The recipe is solid. Look, will I ruin this if I added custard to this? Will I? What's your take on this one? Should I add custard to it? I don't have custard anyway, but well, yeah. Yeah. If you want to know how good the cake tastes, my slice is gone. And I'm not apologizing for it. Okay, Amanda. Oh, yes. You know what? It's amazing on its own, no doubt. The custard is just a little selfish of me because the tenderness of the sponge, the tenderness of the sponge and the sauce dripping over it with the flavor reminds me of sticky toffee. And I've had a good sticky toffee pudding that has custard. And so that's where the custard idea comes from. But I won't bother this cake with custard. Okay. This is great. I haven't had breakfast. So this is one of my 5 a day, people. I'm not complaining. But Amanda knew what she was doing when she asked us to make this cake. Amanda, you knew what you were doing when you asked us to make this cake, because I could literally eat this cake here all by myself. Oh, this cake is good. So I think if you adapted my process, in conclusion, the original recipe by Stephanie Jaworski of joyofbaking.com uses a 9-inch tin, 2 inches deep, which means she will have a larger spread. An inch is not much, but it also makes a difference because I used a 4-inch tin, which is double the size of what she used. So that makes a difference. She used unsalted butter. I opted for salted butter. She suggests that I've lost my train of thought. Well, she said in her recipe she used plain flour or all-purpose flour and then added leavening to it. I used self-raising flour. So those are the small changes I made to suit my circumstance. So if you choose to go with mine, I will leave what I did differently in the description box so that you are better prepared. But I will equally be linking her information there. But of course, when we did what we did, at 40 minutes, our cake wasn't baked. So I don't think the cooking time for this cake, as I have found out, is 40 minutes at all. In fact, I think the cooking time is about an hour and 15 minutes. Fair. And exactly at about an hour and 10 minutes, we inverted our cake and then we can see. So the cooking time for 40 minutes, perhaps if you're using a larger tin that has the butter spread more evenly and is baking shorter, then yes, 40 minutes. But the cooking time is easily an hour and 15 minutes, and I will account for that in the description box for you. Otherwise, for those of you who have joined me today in the live, oh my goodness, we have had so much fun. Of course, we noticed that once the middle wasn't cooking, we made some adaptations for it, and it has served us well. I like the nature of the sponge here, and that is because Stephanie employs the process of creaming and the properties of sponge cake by beating her egg white, mixing it in to elevate or enhance the air structure in the cake so that we have a lighter textured crumb. I love it. So it will be good for you to undertake this bake at home. Let us know what you find and what you think. I am sure I'll be back Thursday with some lemon and poppy seed